it didn't take long for the reciprocal tariffs to take effect. China responded by adding a 34% American tariff on American products, and new reports that Israel's prime minister, who told you is coming to Washington tomorrow to meet with the president, will start the meeting with trade talks and talks about deals with other countries. For more on this and the global implications on this trade war that are coming are Shanker Singham. He's a trade expert working with both the U.S. and the U.K. He's a former advisor to the U.S. Trade Representative as well, and the U.K. Trade advisor. When we look at this as Americans and we look about the world, and the president says, look, we are having to pay these tariffs to their country. We don't do it to them, so we should do it to us. Why were they tariffing us in the first place?
Well, it's not just the tariffs. So the president talked when he made the announcement about what he called non-monetary barriers as well. So it's a whole range of tariffs, regulatory barriers, state-owned companies, subsidies. There's a whole range of things that he basically put into, I think, three buckets. You know, one is trade, tariffs, and so forth. The other is domestic, behind the border. You know, within your border, what are you doing that's damaging to U.S. exporters? And then things like intellectual property protection, that kind of thing. So what he's essentially said is, I'm going to take all of those things and I'm going to put a tariff on you to reflect all of those things. And if you want to lower the tariff, you have to change those things. That's essentially what he said.
One of the arguments that the president has made, especially with the auto tariffs, is that he believes that if you impose these tariffs on foreign-made automobiles, that will force these car makers to start building factories again in the United States. I talked to somebody in the auto industry this week, and he says that we don't have as many factories anymore. We have assembly plants because a lot of these parts are made overseas. Is that a obtainable goal? Could these tariffs on automobiles actually lead to more factory production of automakers here in the United States?
Yeah, so I think some of it may be attainable. I mean, if you're already in the US and it's a question of moving some of your supply chain, we've heard this from Stellantis and some of the others, that they're moving bits of it back to the US. That, I think, is attainable. There are certain manufacturers that can certainly set up plants in the US, but for a lot of supply chains, it's very complex. It's very hard to actually, move that plant into the US.
One thing we know about President Donald Trump, going back to his first book, The Art of the Deal. The deal is very important to Donald Trump. So ultimately, what deal does he want to see to come of this? And what would that look like in your eyes?
Well, first of all, he's not wrong that we failed to deal with these issues over the last 30 years. The book he waved around, the National Trade Estimate, has been published every year for 40 years. If you look at the entries for countries 30 years ago, they're not very different from now. In fact, if anything, they're worse. So he's not wrong to focus on that. I think what he'll do is he's sent a clear signal to countries: lower those barriers, look at your entry, lower those barriers and distortions that you have, and then you're in the deal zone. If you increase them, then you're not in the deal zone. And I think that's the way that he'll think about these things. But he has to have very clear signals. The countries have to understand that that's what they have to do.
For lack of a better term of this, Shankar, Wall Street freaked out on Friday over all of this. Were they right to freak out?
Well, in terms of profitability of companies that have relocated their supply chains to low-cost production centres, then clearly there will be a profitability effect of some of these reorganisations and relocations. So it's understandable that the stock market would react in the way that it is. I think what your viewers have to watch also is the 10-year Treasury yield, because that is the one that will, if this all goes wrong, that's the one that will spike, and that's the one that will increase the cost of borrowing in the US. And then, it might be difficult to do a tax cut if the cost of borrowing is so high. So he'll be watching that one, and he'll be trying to do deals to make sure people see there's a landing zone here that's successful.
And one of the things we've heard from a lot of folks that this is a long game. This might not be a short-term thing. How do you see this plane landing?
Well, so I think what's going to happen is, as we get closer to the summer, a year out from midterm elections, he's going to want to have wins. He's going to want to see deals being done by some countries. So I think if you're able to show that you've lowered your barriers and you get a deal with the US, he'll trumpet those deals. He already talked about Vietnam coming in and saying we're going to do zero tariffs to the US. I think there are other countries like the UK that could be, you know, you could have a deal with the UK. That will be very important to be able to show, I think.
Shanker Singham, we appreciate your expertise, your analytical ability to kind of walk us through all this. We'd love to have you back on again as we continue to cover this.
Thank you very much.
All right.